Getting ready with just a palette real quick. So just a reminder, some colors that you might see, and that way you can match them up to whatever you're using at home. And just remember, we're definitely got a lot of mixing that's going to be happening, so feel free to substitute colors out. Your colors might be a little bit lighter or darker, but I will have a few recommendations just to help you get started. And the first color that you definitely want to have is a great cobalt blue, or cerulean blue would be a really nice substitute as well. Just really want a really nice sky blue for this painting. And if you were looking over my checklist, I will be using a Sharpie just because I really think even the oil-based ones are a great beginner's tool to use. I'm going to definitely go over every size brush I use before I use them, but just make sure you have large, medium, and some detailing brushes off to the side. Another helpful tip is to have your white loaded up in more than one section. I always say that way if you need clean white, you can just grab it from one of those nice clean white piles. It's a really nice, relaxing, fun piece to do. I really enjoy painting snowmen. The most important thing to do is to be using white. Another color I'm just going to go ahead and slide on here is a little bit of black. You won't need a lot of it, so definitely I would advise, just a dime size amount of black will be really good. Nice dark ones, the Mars black. A crimson or a cadmium red, just whichever red you have, like a nice Christmassy red. If you have any phthalo green, I will be using just a little bit of that, so another nice dime size amount. So your red, black, and your green just a little bit. And I'm just starting off with a little bit of each of these colors. So feel free to just have regular water. You won't need any fancy mediums or anything like that. Some paper towels. And you can definitely, because it's YouTube, replay any step that you need to. So please do paint at your own pace. Don't feel as if you have to rush or anything. And then I hope everyone's just going to enjoy some of the soft jazz music in the background. It's nice this time of year to be able to play some instrumental Christmas music in the background. And I'm just going to put just a little bit of brown, some burnt umber, or a raw umber will be perfect for a pine cone color. And that'll be all the colors that we will need. And in 2 minutes, what I'm going to do is just go ahead and get started with the understudy. So definitely feel free to have some snacks and a drink and just have some fun with some painting this evening. After all, it's a snowman, so I definitely think we're going to have some originality with whoever's painting this. They're going to come out completely different for sure. And definitely, if you have any questions, feel free to ask questions in the chat zone, and I'll be sure to try and answer as many of those during the pauses as well. And for brushes, I'm going to definitely have a nice big size brush out for starters. For drawing purposes, I'm also going to have a medium flat and a nice round brush on hand. So there's an inch and a half background brush, and then I have a nice round and flat to help get some of those shapes going. And definitely have a few paper towels, not a few, and your clean water ready to go. And what we're going to do is just go ahead and start setting the tone for this piece. So that way we can just start giving it a nice icy, wintry feel. And I have my canvas in portrait mode for tonight. So you can definitely join me and have the same setup. And what we're going to do is just go ahead and wash this whole entire background with a nice light icy blue tone. And the way I get that color is by mixing. You want to have just like a little bit of gray off to the side, and gray is black and white. And once you have gray, you can make a stonish blue tone for your background. And I'm mixing with another clean brush. I'm going to use my big brush, of course, for this background, but I'm going to play with some colors first. And you get light blue with any blue that you have by just adding some good titanium white to it. And if you swirl these two together, you're going to get more of a stone blue. So again, that was black and white for a little bit of gray. And then you want to just swirl in your light blue to start working in a nice icy blue background. And I definitely love this is going to be a little lighter color, so you don't want it too dark. You definitely want to make sure you're using more white than any other color. So easy on that black and blue. And once you're happy with your color and you're kind of getting that icy blue kind of feeling from it, you want to go ahead and coat your entire background. And one trick that I have to help blend a background out is I just grab my spritz bottle and I just pre-wet in the surface. a little bit of water, and the water is going to help my brush kind of move around like melted butter and completely coat this background. And once you have that color nice and loaded on your brush, and again, I got a nice 1.5-inch brush here. You can use 2 inches or more if you would like, but you want to go ahead and coat your entire background with this icy blue tone. And what I like to do too is allow some textures to show in my background. So you don't have to have it perfectly flat like the walls in the house or anything. You can definitely have some fun with your brush strokes. I definitely am doing some very long ones going from top to bottom. And if you have edges, this is the color I would also wrap on my edges. So if you have flat canvas like me, you don't have any, but if you have stretched canvas, I would definitely stretch the edges with a little bit of color. I always liked wrapped paint edges. And I really am working in the paint on this first layer where the gesso is. I want to get a nice even coat of color. And you can get a little bit messy if the background are allowed to variate in some areas by just picking up a little bit of white and jumping between white and a little bit of your icy blue to help give it some variation if you like. And you just really want to just take your time and coat your entire background. You're always going to do the biggest objects first in your background in this painting, and then we're going to work our way forward. So here I go again, streaking in a little bit more white and some icy blue. And I'm just going from top to bottom, so just taking my time and making sure I'm really getting a good amount of paint. And that reference to some melted butter is also really good because it is the amount of paint you want to have on your brush. You always want to start off with a good beaded amount of paint, and just to mix more of that background color, begin to grab black, a little bit of white and blue, and swirl those together. And I'm just going up and down. So getting some icing on the cake so we have something to decorate with. And absolutely embracing the variety in your mixing. So if at one area is a little bit lighter or darker, it's going to have to create a little bit of some light play for this painting. So I say go for it and leave it if you do. You can always redirect brush strokes too by just taking your brush up and down right through the paint before it dries. So, and see that, just going right up and down. So I see any brush strokes I don't want, I can just redirect them and give them a new look. And what I'm going to do is go ahead and pause with this step for you. And then I'm going to continue in a moment with just shaping in where we want our snowman and everything we're going to have in the background. And you can wash off that larger brush at this point. So don't forget that we have a nice medium-sized brush and a round brush here, which are going to be really great for this next step. We're just going to build in some of our larger shapes. So we're definitely not detailing, we're just building up tones and also putting some of our larger shapes into our composition. So we have some things to decorate with. And as we're waiting for that to dry, I just got my big brush nice and clean. Hope you got your snacks and your drinks as well, because it definitely helps with the pauses in between steps. Plus, I always tell people too, the snacks and the drinks give you a moment to look at your piece and put that brush down so you're not just adding but also evaluating while you're painting. Both are very useful to have. And happy Friday, everyone, too. I'm so glad it's the weekend. End of a long, hard week. And don't forget, if you do have any edges, if you need to do a second coat of paint, that really is all dependent upon how many layers you've done. I feel like once I went through twice in most areas, so that was enough to cover most of my canvas. If you need more than that, that's absolutely fine too. Now, what I like to do for the ornament wise, this is one of my favorite pieces to do with family and friends. And just, you can literally look around the room and find circles to trace everywhere, including even the plate you're using. So wherever you're about to grab a lid from a candle, or if you have an extra plate, that's actually the exact size of your snow globe. And what you can do is put that onto your canvas and just trace that. You can either do that with another tool, but what I'm going to do is just pick a color off my plate. And I like to use just a little bit of white, so a color that if I make a mistake, it's easy to buff it away and start over again. And I would pick up one of your medium brushes. I got my medium flat here in my hand and I'm loading it up really well. Got it damp first and then loaded it up. And once you have that brush loaded, you want to go ahead and you can actually put your hand down to help hold this in place, but you just want to pick a spot that gives you plenty of room for any of the decorations and everything else. You can also, of course, use paint markers to help do understudies as well, since they are paint loaded in them, so they can also get used on top of a wet surface. And I just want a nice light outline, so even after I move the plate, I can add more to it, but I just want a nice guideline to where is a circle. And I feel like a plate was a nice size. So feel free to darken the line after you do a light tracing of your plate or your candle lid. And I like a flat brush just because there's plenty of bristles to help load up that paint with. And I did that with white and a nice medium flat. So I'm going to go ahead and wash this off. And that's just for the size of the snow globe portion. Definitely always helpful to find the best tool to help out with jobs like making perfect circles. And once you have that circle done and traced on, what I would go ahead and do is decide on our little snowman's body, and he is not a 3-tier, he's actually a 2-tier, which is actually more realistic for me in my childhood, to be honest. A lot of snowmen I did were not 3-tier. I was always thinking kids who could get 3-tier snowmen had really good amounts of snow, or that snow was a lot deeper than what I was starting off with. So within this one, I'm going to continue using white. And what you want to do is go ahead and trace in where you want your snowman to go. And his head lands about center. So just to give you an idea, you can actually go ahead and do the head first. So I'm going to go ahead and make that a little bit darker. And it's just a circle for now. So there's a white circle. I just did a white circle for his head, and then you can come underneath of him and kind of put like an egg shape. And I'm just going to retrace this circle a little bit bigger to fit onto this body I'm creating here. So I'm just going to start pulling down his shoulders and then rounding out its bottom to sit in the bottom of this ornament. Then you can fill in the rest of his body once you're happy with that egg-like shape. And it's very transparent right now, but we are just sketching and doing an understudy, so we got many more layers to do. So you just want to make sure you got a nice shape for him so that way you can go back on top of this and put a little bit more details to him. So there's his little body right here in the middle. And it's absolutely fine with me right now that he's a little bit light blue. I really just want to get a nice shape saved for planning purposes. There is definitely going to need a second coat of white is what I do, but while the paint's nice and wet, I like planning. And then that way, when he is dry, I can do a second coat to fluff him up a little bit more. So I'm not really worried about the blue just yet. But there is more that we can do with this little white paint. While we still have this, we can make this a little bit rounder and more like glass. And what you can do is after you're done drawing in your snowman, what you can do is like retrace that shape and widen up the circle a little bit more. And what you can do is dry off your brush. So you just want to take it off on your napkin and dry it off. And you just want to kind of go around streaking in like parenthesis marks a little bit of white paint to give it a reflection mark and just have that on there to help it look more like glass. And we're just going to round out the shape too a little bit more while we're doing this. And the trick is to not blend this out, so that's why you want to dry off your brush a little bit. And you just want to put a few reflective streaks so that way it looks more like it's a mirror or a window, like your car window. So just a few highlights on here, and I'm just doing a lot of curved parenthesis-like markings on this ornament. To do it as many as you like. I'm really hanging on the outer areas, not really touching a snowman, but I'm definitely working around these edges. So this is definitely very transparent. So that definitely is going to help it look a lot prettier. I'm really loving the color palettes. I might be a little biased since I like blue already, but I really love stone and grays, cobblestone. They're just really nice for pieces like this or painting cabins on a starry night. But now that we have this element nicely streaked, we're going to be able to mix a little bit of gray next. But you just really want to look around and make sure that you have the shape nicely done in. And we're just going to continue adding in aspects to play with in this painting. So something else that we're going to be able to add to this is a topper for the ornament. And the color that I would suggest is a little bit of gray. So again, that was black and white. And I don't go on like a charcoal level of gray. I like the silvery, medium, and lighter grays for this piece. So you don't have to use that much black. And don't forget, a little bit of water will help this paint lay down smoothly. And I'm just going to go right above the snowman's head and make a little mark for where center is. So you want to just tap your brush and see where that's at. After you have center, you can just mark 2 more lines for the top of that topper and have that right there. And then you want to do a parenthesis mark right above those 3 marks. And what I do is also pull the cap piece over the white line. So I'm making sure this is in the very actual center, and it's a round ornament. So I want to make sure that it's sitting in the middle. So it's like a very nice rounded box shape or a pillow. And I feel like this is also why I love teaching painting. A lot of people tell me they can't draw, and I'm like, you should totally try painting. It's a lot like sculptures, only with color, because you're thinking about shapes and it's not much about lines and tones and what color palettes really appeal to you. So I feel like it's very therapeutic because you get a lot of say in it. You'd be really inspired by an image, and yet you're still going on this journey where you don't know how your piece is going to come out. But there's a lot of decisions, like a puzzle, along the way, which is why I really just love sitting down in the evening and getting just to paint and pick something really fun and adorable like a snowman this time of year. After you're happy with that shape though, you can go ahead and fill that in as well. So I'm going to go ahead and fill in my pillow. And then I'm just going to take a little bit more gray with my flat brush still and draw a string to attach it to the top part of my canvas. Like it's hanging right here. And if you use your brush too, what you can do is go ahead and make a gray that's a little bit darker by adding a little bit more black. And you can make this look a little bit more 3D by outlining it a little bit with a slightly darker gray. And putting a parenthesis mark at the top will also help to create a better illusion for this cap. So a parenthesis mark, you're just making a curved line right there and one at the bottom so that we can clearly see the top and the bottom to this cap. So now it's very evident. You know, 2 tones will make it super realistic, but it makes it look a little bit more familiar to our eyes. And I just did a few short lines there on the side just to put some ridges into it. So now it looks a little bit more like metal. And as I'm waiting for this to dry, the snowman ornament is also like really customizable. I feel like you can do the snowman any way that you want. So definitely feel free to switch any of the colors when we get to that point, and even add to the wreath decorations, or think about the wreath that you have hanging up on your door and channel some of that as your inspiration and as a reference for some of the details that you add to this piece to make it really a one-of-a-kind piece to hang up. Or maybe you're like me and thinking about a lot of movies you plan on watching when you get a moment. So another thing I'm going to do with our white is make a few decorative swirls of white in our background as well. And this is where I would use my rounded brush. So once you have these shapes in, a nice place to use some this time with the background being a little bit drier is to load up a little bit of white on your rounded brush, and I definitely got a lot of water in order to load it up, so it would definitely glide for me and make these fun shapes. But you just want to kind of do like wintry swirls and dabs, so I kind of like to do like little dots for snow. I can also do a few swirls here in the corners of my canvas. Just something to make it a little bit more decorative, like a Christmas card. And then I think I'm going to make another swirl right here. And I got another swirl right here. And then I can come out of this corner, kind of looking like a question mark just a little bit. And then I'm just coming around here on this other side. And can just flick your brush for a few. And don't forget, you can just do little dots for like some fallen snow. And I'm just tapping my brush for these little dabs of snow here and there. And you can put them in quite a few places that you like. And I didn't forget this corner over here. And here's another swirl I got coming in on this side. So there's a nice swirl coming in here. So here's a few more dabs, and then I think I'm going to be good with some of these swirly snow details. You can add as many or as few as you like, and don't forget to be partaking in your beverage and your snack after you're done. And there's my snowman, and you can add a second coat to his body now. You just always got to wait a good 2 to 4 minutes in between layers for the acrylics to happen. I don't completely filament this second layer. I'm just touching up the areas that I dragged a little bit of light blue, so that wasn't his whole body. But I would just add as many swirls as you like and dab a few bits of snow falling. This is one of those pieces too that if you wanted to, you can flick some snow on it if you would like, so you can always tap your brush together for that element, or just pull on the bristles a little bit when you load a little bit of wet white paint on it. Definitely feel free to use this moment to just pause a second and just have fun with the snow here in the background. And I'll just continue to play some jazz. And I am available during the chat if you do have any questions. So in a moment, what I'm going to do is just cut in a few other smaller shapes. Definitely always a good idea to let the paint rest a little bit as well as ourselves. So what I'm going to do is start decorating just some of the elements going on in the background. So I'm going to be using phthalo green, and I'm going to be mixing it down quite a bit. So I do have pine cones and a few berry elements that I'm going to be putting in the corners, and you can technically do these at the top, bottom, so you can just want to pick two corners. So you can either do both the top corners or a top and another one diagonal from each other, and they'll both come out really nice. And what I'll do is I'm going to break down the two larger elements for you one at a time. The pine cones, I'm going to use my flat brush, or filbert will also give you a really nice rounded shape for these, but you can always do rounded shapes with your flat brush too. And what I like to do is mix a little bit of my gray or black and white into the brown. And what I do is start off with my lighter color first, and then I'm going to go back in with a shadow for my pine cones as well. And pine cones are like U-shapes, really wide open U's and C's, or crescent moons that are folding into each other. So what I do is a pile of crescent moons that are slightly getting bigger as I go back towards my back of my canvas. And so there's one. And it's just a series of crescent moon shapes. So I'm going to show that again. You want to load up your brush if you're brown. And I mixed a little bit of gray into mine to make it more matte and medium toned. And so I'm just going to do some more crescent moon shapes. I'll start piling them in one by one behind each other. And there I go. And one more, I think right over here would be really nice. So again, you want to have some crescent moon shapes, and you want to have them getting small to big. And there's my crescent moons, and I just go until I hit the base of my pine cone. And once you have this lighter gray in, what all you have to do is add a little bit of black to darken the value of the brown you're using. So go for like an espresso color or a nice dark chocolate. You just want to take your time, go with that light brown first. And once you have the light brown helping to set up that shape for you, you can go in between it to fill in all those gaps with some more brown. And I'm still just using my medium brush, but it's all about the layering for this shape. So now I have two browns helping put off this shape of my pine cones. And of course, we're going to be able to put a little bit of snow on everything in this piece. And you can either do it by lining them or flicking snow onto them. But you can definitely frost everything that you are working on right now. There's a shadow tone for each of these. So just a nice crescent moon for you in here. And then I'm going to do the same thing over here, just taking my brush with my darker chocolate color and going in to fill in those gaps after I do my brown crescent moons. And there's my other pine cone over there, and I got my lighter ones too. So they're not each the same. And you can always touch up these shapes after you get the main bodies on there. So if you feel like, you need to make the bottom longer on one or vice versa, you can still do that. So now I got some pine cones, and in a moment I'll show you how I get some greenery in between them. And that, again, you want to just make sure, just like the background, two-tone it, just to give it a little bit more dimension. So I'm just going to pause and sip a little and clean off this brush, and that way I'm going to get out my rounded brush and have that waiting for greenery. So you definitely want to grab your rounded brush as soon as you're done with your pine cones, so you can wash off that flat brush. And just make sure you have your phthalo green loaded up, and I'll show you how I mix for the color tones for the next. what I'm going to do is go ahead and start painting in some of the greenery with the round brush. So I would just grab a little round brush and get it wet. And once it's wet, I'm going to come over here and play around with my greens. And what I like to do is just make them a tad bit more toned and wintry by adding a little bit of brown and white and bring that green down a little bit. It's a little too vibrant for my liking, so I'm just going to use my brown over here to put a little bit of earth tone to it. And once you're happy with the green that you have, which can be lighter than mine's, if you like a foresty green, you can add more black to go down a little bit. I'm just really trying to go for a more muted greenery color, and so there's one. I'm just going to load up my brush with this color. So now it's white, brown, a little bit of green. Get a nice frosted look. And what you want to do is start off with one little parenthesis mark and just start a V pattern. So every time you add something on the left, you want to add something on the right, minus the one that you start with that's going to be in the middle. And you just want to keep going back and forth. So I'm just going to keep crisscrossing like there's a stem in the middle. If you would like a path to follow, you can always just draw from that first one where you want it to go very lightly and then continue your V. So V, and I'm just flicking the brush. You don't have to use a lot of pressure on it. You really just want to start from the middle and flick outward so it gets a little bit thinner. I'm going to pull it in on this side. And I'm just going to go until I hit my canvas edge. Don't forget, if a color comes through a little bit patchy or has a little bit of dot 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 in it, you can always do another layer in acrylic paint. And just do a second coat to smooth that out. And you can always hunt for those gaps too, and they don't always all go in the same direction, so it's okay to flick some more of them downward if you want. Now I'm going to do that just because also if it's been snowing, these won't all be completely perky. Some might be hanging a little bit lower than others. And you just want to go in some other places and just continue adding in some greenery. So I'm just going to come over here and put one there and just planning, just got my little round brush throwing in where I want them coming from. So maybe one here, one there, and maybe one over here too. So now I mix up a bigger pile since I know I like this green and I've tested it out. So I'm just going to really get me a lot of it made. And once you got the pattern down, you want to just go leave a center tip and then just go from there. So again, I got a round brush. It's always a good idea. Make sure you don't overfill your brush. It does affect the shape of the tip that you're working with. So you can always get more, so don't have that plate too far away. I love that some elements now are starting to overlap in this painting, making it a little bit more interesting. And it doesn't always have to be a full-on plant either. It can just be aspects of greenery to help fill in some of the gaps. So like, for example, I could do some little crescent shapes over here in this corner. And there you go. And I can start over here with my V pattern again. Mix up a little bit more of that green and just continue having fun doing a little bit of some filler. And everything that's going to be inside the ornament will just be literally switching the size of your brush and just repeating these for the elementals that you're going to be doing here in front of your snowman. And this greenery also is going to make a really lovely framework for your painting. So frames don't always have to go all the way around. Sometimes it's just a really pretty element that we add. And see, I'm just doing a few random pieces too. Don't always have to do a full-on branch. And now I'm adding in one last one up here. And the other ones, like the others on here on the side, don't have to be full. They can just be minis. And there I go. And the last element that you can add in is actually a really fun one. And what I'm going to do is actually get one of my big brushes out so I can show you something, because we're actually going to be using the tip. So when you are done with that step, I will definitely figure out which one of your brushes has the biggest base to use for this next step. Because what we're going to do is actually dab in those cranberry shapes with our brushes. So we're going to have these right off to the side. And I hope everybody's just been having a really nice day. And if you're in Virginia, you probably are enjoying some of the unusual warm weather we get in the middle of winter. It literally will be snowing one day and then completely hot, and you're just stripping off all those sweaters all over again. And this is definitely one of those warm days before another cold corn. So definitely don't make those sweaters go away. We all know that cold front's right behind it. And I'm still answering any questions, so whether you're using the Messenger here or the Messenger on Facebook, definitely feel free to let me know any thoughts, or if you're doing anything different, I would love to hear that too. And don't forget to be partaking in those food and snacks. And put those brushes down after you're done cleaning off your last one. The last and final thing you want to do for your greenery is to make sure you use like the back of your brush, but you want to just dip directly into a red tone in order to use it for some of your berry elements. And I will say this, you can use the red the way it is, or you can even mix it a little bit deeper to get more of a crimson tone. So you can just take a little bit of black and mix that into your red and just go until you get to burgundy or a crimson, and use that for a lot of your berries. So I'm just scooping in some black and mixing that in. Get a nice deep tone. It's crimson. And the back of your brushes, of course, the rounded edges are going to be a different size on each one. So definitely keep in mind, as you grab more than one brush, you can get different size berries. So for example, if you use this one, you're going to get some smaller berries. And you just wipe that off on your rag. And if you need some bigger ones, you just pick up a bigger brush. And you can always practice to see if it's going to give you the circle you think it is on your plate before you touch your canvas. It's always a good idea to test something before you go to your painting. And this is really helpful for any of the smaller berries, because you can just swirl the brush too in order to make some bigger berries. But this is really helpful to get some circles pretty quick. And all these elements I'm showing you are great practice, because all the ones inside of the ornament are just miniature forms of every last one of these, and you just need to switch to a smaller brush, which is what we're going to do. This is definitely good practice for another area of the painting. You can stop whenever you feel comfortable too. And again, switch up which brush size you have in your hand for different sizes. If you like variety, or if you want them to be consistent, make sure to use one. So there is some berry shapes for you. I love this color. Some of them are burgundies and some crimson tones that are just so pretty this time of year. And just washing out those brushes real quick and grabbing some of my crackers. And after you're done with that step, and when you feel comfortable to, this is where you might want to go ahead and grab your detailing brushes out, and you can repeat all those steps just in miniature form. And what we're going to do is take a smaller flat and round, and I'm just going to repeat that process again. And so I'm just going to go below these bigger ones and just go ahead and add some right inside of the globe. So I'm going to take a flat brush. Make sure I get it nice and wet. It's a little warm in my studio for certain. It's always handy to have a pile of baby wipes near you too when you start having this much fun when you're painting. It's bound to get on your arms. So what I'm going to do is make a little bit of like a brown twig to follow. So just something like a guideline. So I'm just going to do a little bit of black and brown. And I'm just going to wiggle out a twig of how far up I want this to go. So I'm just going to go down this side with a twig and go all the way up to the other side. And what I can do is do a few branches to do my greenery off on. So like this is a little snap off of a plant. So I'm just going up and down doing a V pattern to build some branches, and I just got a little flat brush to do this part. And maybe make some of the branches longer than others. But this will be a nice little guideline just to be like, okay, well, where to stop with this piece. So I'm going to clean off my brush, and I'm not going to go as dark with the green inside of the globe. I think I'm going to use that phthalo pretty lightly. Maybe just use the white instead of dousing as much brown into it this time. And once I have that loaded off, I like to take a little bit off on the side of my plate. But I'm going to just repeat what we did in the background and do a little bit of that V pattern, just smaller. So I'm going to load this up. It won't be a little barren twig anymore in a moment. It's a wonderful little pine element into our painting. Just dabbing the brush really. You don't really have to draw that much of the flat because it usually is about the length of the plant that I tend to do. I typically go up a size or down a size to fit. So I'm really just dabbing a brush and pulling it a little bit in order to get this shape. A lot of flat brushes, I use them already because you just push down on them a little bit, you can get petals out of them and a lot of other plants. So a lot of painting is just about picking the right tool. Because maybe if another one, it's possible but harder. And a lot of artists will tell you they had a lot of aha moments when they started doing art with a lot of other things in life too. So, you know, with experience, you're just like, how did I notice sooner? And we tell ourselves, well, would have never found out if we hadn't made the mistake first. So there I go, and it fills all that in for me. And I just used a little flat brush because then I can go in now. And I'm not really going to try and fit a bunch of pine cones in, but I definitely am going to add the berry elements inside of my ornament. So I'm going to flip this brush around, dab in a little bit of just red this time instead of the crimson. So I'm just going to grab a little bit of my red from my well and dab a little bit of some bright red circles. Everyone has a different way of doing things to get to the same finish line. So I just tell people it's always interesting to watch other people's painting journeys, especially here on YouTube, because there's a lot of talent and a lot of people have had a great amount of time to make some new content. And it definitely never is going to be like, oh, I already saw this before. Because, you know, every artist will be telling you, but a repeat the same painting, you'll discover something new when you redo it. So it definitely doesn't, doesn't work really that way with painting. And you can tap a little bit of brighter red onto these berries here in the background to make a few of them pop a little bit more. To give them a highlight, if you will. So I'm just dabbing regular red without us mixing black into it. And feel free to go back to any of the elements you added too, just to touch them up. You know, sometimes the first few strokes really help you get the shape of an item down, and then the second time you can really help to clean it up. So I'm just going to take regular brown, for example, and just examine my pine cones and clean up their shapes a little bit now that they're dry. And then I'm going to double check that greenery too. And I always like to say, you know, things out in nature are variety. You don't need to grab the same color twice or remix it the exact same way. Variety actually will help the painting out a lot more. So it's always good to buy more than one kind of brown and more than one kind of white, and just play around with mixing different tones. Sometimes you bump into the right color by accident. So I'm just, you know, making the pine cones a little less flat by adding a second coat on them and giving them some more vibrancy by doing so. And I'm going to touch up my greenery a little bit too as I pause for this next upcoming step. So I'm just going to sip and look around my piece and see what I can fine tune a little bit before moving along to our snowman. Just working with my greens now, and I'm still using that little flat brush to go and just make sure the shape of everything's looking nice, and second coating a few colors that they seem flat. So my first layer, definitely as it dries, you're probably noticing it flattening and the color beneath it interacting with it a little bit. That second coat won't interact with the stone blue as much, so it's going to help give it some dimensions. It'll definitely be a more vibrant green than the one on the bottom. On the bottom will have more of an icy tone because of that color tone that we've already set this piece up with. So this next part, I'm just going to start adding some elements to our snowman now that we have a lovely setting for him. So for like the face, just as a simple first step that you can do is as simple as the cranberries and the berry elements, you can actually dot for the eyes as well to help set up that face a little bit. So that will be the first thing I'm going to add, and some buttons would be really nice. And this is definitely where I always tell people your personality is going to come out with a piece like this. You definitely don't have to worry about them being identical. As long as it's a happy snowman, can't possibly be hurt by anything we do. And I'm just going to do 3 more dots here on his chest. So you just want to dab with a paint marker or your Sharpie in order to get the buttons on this snowman. And some eyes. this, of course, is my favorite part to be in any painting because really we're just going to have fun with some elemental light details and just decorate our snowman for certain. Another detail that's really fun to dab out is the heart. The candy cane one is something I just like a dab in as well. And I actually am going to put in the arms first before I do that because those are also in black. But I would suggest using like a rounded brush in order to do your arms. You can also substitute out this tool and use a paint marker or a Sharpie to do the arms. But you make sure your arms come down at least almost to the midpoint of the belly. So for example, if you wanted the scarf to be like right here, just make yourself a little planning note that the scarf's going to be here. Then you make sure that the shoulders, the arms can come down really low and swing all the way around so that way he's holding his belly right underneath your buttons. So there's one arm coming down from the shoulders, and then you can just reload your brush up and do the same thing on the other side, and just estimate as best you can to get them pretty close. Get the insisted twiggy arm. Just okay if it has a few bumps in it. And there's two arms done in the same color. And I just made some planning notes for where you can also put in the scarf. And after you have your twig arms settled in, I would go ahead and mix a little bit of brown into that black on your plate. And with that deep color, you want to go ahead and draw in your top hat. And I would still use a small rounded brush. And make sure that when you draw a hat in, you actually come over the head a little bit so it's actually seated on his head. And you want to start off by just drawing a straight line. And once you have this straight line, you just want to go above that and put in a little bit of a rectangle. And then you have a shape to fill in. And you can just let that dry before we add any other elements to that. You just want to do a nice rounded rectangle again and make sure you got a nice lip on that hat. Enough space to sit two birds on there if I wanted to. And then while you're up here, we can also add a few fun elements to the top of the ornament. And I'm going to use gray real quick from our plate to put some definition in this hat. So I'm just using on the top part to make it slightly lighter. And then the same thing, you can use a little bit of this gray to round out and put like a nice little decorative edge to this topper. You can do like little rounded C shapes one after another, repetitively around the base to make it a little bit more ornate. And this is like a lot you can get done with the black, with your Sharpies, or with your paint markers, or your paintbrush. There's plenty we can just jab out that way. And I think the pink cheeks and the nose will be my next place of attack. The next element that I'm going to add into this piece is a little bit of pink. Will be how I'm going to make a blush tone for the cheeks on the snowman. And pink, you can just use a little bit of your red and your white and make a nice light blush tone. And I'm just going to use my round brush again after I cleaned it off and dab that color in for the cheeks. And just swirl my brush to make a nice circular fill. And there's a little bit of blush now on his cheeks. You can always do a traditional orange, for example, for the nose, which is yellow and red. But if you didn't want to do that, another color you can do is a lighter brown tone. Or use one of your warmer browns at the lightest tone possible, but either one will make a really nice nose. And of course, off this palette, you definitely just want to use that warm color in order to put that nose in. Some people put a stick in for the nose or to use a button. So either one, you just want to drag out kind of more like channel like a rounded carrot shape or really crooked rough one, but you can like totally drag the nose in any direction, down, up, sideways. And I'm just dabbing and get that length that I want. I'm just still using my little round brush to start doing these small details on his face. So again, a little pinch of orange or a light brown tone will be really cute for the carrot part of his nose. And I would clean off that round brush after you dragged out your nose and pick up the flat brush in order to put in any color that you would like for the scarf. And I feel like a color that I would like to grab would be my burgundy off my plate because I really love my burgundy. And you just want to make sure that when you do it, it's two rectangles, two very curvy rectangular shapes for a scarf. But you want to make sure that you use two tones again in order to give it a little bit of dimension. So what I like doing is using that deepened red we made with red and black And then you can scoop just regular red that you didn't mix any black into in order to do the front part. So it's like a rectangle that goes across the front, and then you can sweep the lighter one off to the sides. And you can bring that scarf up as high or as low as you like. And just dragging that brush right across. And on top of the hat, what you can do is dab a little bit of greenery on top of the hat. Now that you have the scarf and where you want your hat at, you can just dab like a little sprig on the one side. Doesn't have to be on both. And then turn your brush around again just to dab a little bit of red onto your hat. And remember, just take your time, just enjoy decorating your snowman and change up as many details as you like. And the candy cane is really fun to do too for this piece. But before I get to that one, I'm going to mix a little bit of white and my red and just add some textures that will help this scarf look a little bit more wrapped. So I'm just putting in some lighter red throughout this scarf just to make it pop a little bit more. You could even use the residual of your pink if you have any left. So I'm just going to keep using my red right now to drag this color right over. So there goes my red. My plate is quite messy at this point with the amount of elements, but I like distributing them as well. So when I'm done with the color, I do look around to see what else I can do with it before it dries on my plate. And after you have a scarf for your cheeks and buttons and everything like that on your snowman, the last detail you can do to design them a little bit is do the candy cane heart. And the candy cane heart is all red, and since the background's already white, you just want to load up that little round brush with a little bit of red. And just, you can even draw a little bit of a heart if it makes it easier. But I just start by making sure it's nice and centered. And I just dab the brush to make the shape of a heart. And make sure I got nice amounts of gaps for the red and white so that way they're separated. And then you just want to make sure you bring the hook shape down a little bit so they look more like candy canes. And now that you have the red, I'll let that dry a little bit and I can go back in with some white to touch that up if need be. But you definitely don't want too much wet paint or anything around, but I can now touch up just the edges if I need to and just evaluate things like that. Now that I have everything else done, and this would be a really good point to pause on this piece and allow that paint to set up for a moment and enjoy all my snacks too. So I'm just using clean white right now on my brush, and I'm just checking my edges again on my ornament and just making those a little bit sharper. So you might also have some details that after they dry, you're like, it's a little bit lighter than I was expecting. So second time around ought to help. Definitely just want to make sure this white is very clear and at least the edge, just so that way it looks like he's inside of the ornament. And it's definitely was very helpful to trace for that circle element, so we have a nice guideline. Some other areas you can go ahead and tap some more white into is some of the areas in your background. So what I'm going to do is just simple, more crescent moon shapes, but this time I'm just going to go around still adding white. So I just really wanted to make sure though that I focused around here and saw it could need a little bit of white. And this area I'm going to come back and touch it up with some white as well to make it look a little bit more frosty. But there's plenty to work on that's already dry though. But what I would also invite anyone to do is I would get clean water at this point. So after I was done touching up some of these elements, I have a lot of red tones. I need a lot of clean white for the second layer that I'm planning on putting in. So this is a really good time just to take a break and switch out that water cup before we move on to another step. And again, we're going to be going into the background to work on a few more details. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that myself. So what I'm going to do now is just go ahead and work on this background with my paintbrush and just a little bit of white. And I would do this with a nice flat brush. So I would get out of your detailing box a nice flat or a slanted brush. And all this paint on my fingers. Evidence that you're having a good time painting. And I'm just going to get a little bit of white loaded onto this brush. And like I mentioned before, I'm just going to play around by adding some snow elements now to this piece. So you can also touch up any of your swirls if you want to do second coat or just to round out the shape. You can always revisit those and put some more twirl on them. If those are in a good spot to be, you can go someplace that hasn't caught any snow yet. And some places you might want to just dab and release your brush and do some short areas of snow would be your pine cones. And you just want to be random and space it out. And I'm just dabbing, and as you can see I'm jumping and going in between the lines so it's caked up in different areas. And if you have some snow caked on your pine cones, you can go around and just do some parenthesis marks amounts of white on these plants as well. You might go up and down those V shapes and just go ahead and do some clear amounts of white coming down. And I'm just flicking my wrist really. And if you do snag any white paint, the immediate thing to do is just clean off your brush and go in a different spot until it's dry enough for you to add that. So that's okay if you do hit a pocket because the paint was too thick. And if you can do a pinky test as well to test an area before you add any clean white on top of it. And again, I'm just taking a slanted or a flat brush and you just want to go in and start adding little streaks of white. And if you snag any wet paint, either give it another 2 minutes to dry before you do this step, or you can just wash off your brush and just continue. You might just hit an area that was a little bit thicker than some other spots, and it might not have dried as quickly. I love those snow frosted trees too. Those ones are so pretty. So I'm just going to keep snow crusting some things. Definitely do as little as you, or as much as you think will help this piece out. And I just got a few more on this side left to cover. And look at all that dimension that you get as well as you just keep flicking your wrist and adding in just a very simple element, but it really adds a lot to this wintry piece. And just like in the beginning, if you want to add any extra snow swirls or marks of reflection on your ornament, you can do that as well. It definitely helps to make elements inside and outside the ornament interact better with each other and embrace that sense of wintry, snowy feel. This is definitely a piece too. I always emphasize patience, let everything dry, because you don't want accidental amounts like, smudge colors or white, easily mixing some pastel tones, which are just happy little accents that happen along the way. But by just, pacing ourselves as we go along with this piece, it's not been too big of a concern of mine. I'm just cleaning off my brush now since I've had quite a lot of snow in. Another element that I like to add snow on is right here in the middle, but before I do that, something I was waiting on to see where I was at is I like to stripe and put some more dimension here on this ribbon string. And what I'm going to do is load up this brush with a little black, and I would do it on a nice flat brush, so just black on a flat brush, and you just want to curve upward. So going on a diagonal with your brush is how you want to pull that off. So I'm just going to make a striping pattern on this rope. And make sure that if it's not sharp on your brush, you can always pause a moment and just take it along the side of your plate, and I'll help you sharpen it out before you go back in. It's okay to unload a brush and make sure that the bristles and things are all ready to go before you make a line on your canvas. And now that I have that done, I'm just going to tap a little bit more snow. So that gets my other paint some time to dry. And so just back to taking cling white, and some areas I can continue to dab some snow would be here on the rims and edges of my ornament, or even on that top part, so I can go right here and frost a little bit over here. And then just dabbing my brush like I did everywhere else. So over here on the top part again, I can dab a little bit more snow. I can drag it down a little bit for some added realistic effect. The hat can have some snow too. You can dab snow right onto the rim. I'm just dabbing that brush so I don't accidentally mix any color tones. And there's some snow now added in. And don't forget, eraser colors are always the color that you last did. That was before you added that one on. So if you ever need to like buff something, reshape in something, you can always go back to the color that's right behind something to clean up its shape. And take my little round brush and just keep cleaning up elements we just added to this piece. So I'm just gonna, you can still keep dabbing snow if that's the element you think your painting's missing. And this is a little round brush I'm going to take over here to my candy canes and just dab in between some of those spots that clean them up. In a few places, maybe I dab too hard. I just think I can make it look a little bit cleaner. A few areas of my striping look a little funny, so I just fixed those up. Using a little bit of pink to add some frostiness, like some snow on the scarf as well. And dab some of those pinks over here. Maybe a little bit of snow on some of the berries. And of course, some of these, again, handy dandy marker will help a lot if you don't want to use your detailing brush. Just get a little tool out to help with those little details. And my hat seems to not be passing a pinky test just yet, so I want to add some more snow to it, but it's a place where I'm tapping my finger and there's a lot of wetness right there. I can, though, take a little bit of another color and add maybe some ribbon or some wrapping to that hat. So I can mix a little bit of light brown, for example, and put just a little rectangle across that hat to put a little stripe there in the middle. Put some warmth over our snowman along with that candy cane heart. So there's a scarf frosted, some frosted elements in the background. And still want to be using just your round brush, your detailing size brushes at this point, just adding small things to help define the snowman a little bit more. And as I'm waiting on that to dry, I'm going to just touch up my stripes, for example. And it's these little things that when you get to detail, that this is why all people's paintings, you could be in the same painting class with someone else, and your piece will come out differently because you just are seeing different things that came to your eye that you're like, I want to change this, I want to work on this aspect of this piece. Just how our pieces come out so unique. Or what we choose to leave or decide isn't a mistake or something that you like or a happy accident that happens along the way that really gets to help your piece tell a story. It's not everything's worth like, well, I wasn't expecting it, but doesn't mean that you have to get rid of it. And now I can add some more frosting up here onto this hat. I'm gonna drag a little bit off from the top. And just tap some more over here on the rim. Just adding a few more areas to just touch up before calling this painting done. Which always makes you happy. You gotta definitely always tell yourself when to stop because you definitely have things that you can just keep going and going in any painting. But ones like this, I like doing them because they are short and there is usually a pretty evident, oh, it's okay. It's cute, it's adorable, and it's done. And what I'm going to do is when I sign pieces, I usually just like to show that I really have a very minimalistic way of doing it. I have just a few things that I like to note just because I'm bound to forget, like the date I did something if I don't, or the size of something before I hang it up. Just little notes I like to jab, and I guess that's the inner teacher in me when I do things like that. So you definitely don't have to, name every piece that you ever create. Some things kind of speak for themselves well enough, and I feel like this piece does, but definitely want to add things like it's just wind and things like that on the edges. I'm just doing a few more snow swirls because I really like them. He's so cute. And I was just trying to see, can I use up any more of this paint before I get rid of this plate, this palette for tonight, which I think I mentioned, it came out pretty messy. So I don't like having disposable sheets for my palette, or I find a little foam plate to use as well. And what I really love too is the ability to really have the playbacks on all these live sessions. So if there's anything you like to see again, it's as easy as rewinding like a movie at home. You always go back to any part you need. And don't forget, just want to, I'm doing right here, dabbing in the snow to try and get as less blending above a newly added color as possible. I really just hope people do add a lot of those personal touches I was mentioning before. And if you have, of course, a stretched piece, I do hope you hang this one up for the holiday season or give it to someone as a nice, thoughtful gift. Paintings are the new gift cards this year. You just want to go really slow. If your tape ever does cling to the paint, you can definitely use a blow dryer to reheat the paint to make it relax a little bit and let go. And I want to wish everybody a happy holidays and a Merry Christmas. And thanks for watching me do this paint session for you tonight. I really hope you just enjoyed the process and got to have some fun with some painting and got to sit down and just relax. And if you're painting with somebody, it's always good because you can catch up on a conversation and so on. And definitely feel free to play back any parts that you need and use it for many, many more. So have a great rest of your evening, and thanks again for watching. And if you have any remaining questions, please do feel free to ask them. And I'm just going to move this piece over a little bit and just get some lines in here. Last little nitpicky step that I always do. I do this for every piece, but sometimes I see something I want to sharpen up or edit a little bit. Little reasons to keep around that pen. And you can also sign your piece with your Sharpies and your paint markers as well. They do a really good job at letting you write on the canvas. It's easier to, of course, do that on media paper or watercolor paper, but it's a little bit easier with some Sharpies. And that'll be my final step for this piece. Have a great night.